Good afternoon. We've got a bunch of code examples and demonstrations in this session. So if you're sat near the back, I know you might want to make a quick exit, and that's fine by us. You've got planes to catch, you've got to get out of here. But if you want to move forward a little bit, that's also great. We do have a couple of videos that may not show up if you're at the back.
Excellent. So welcome to Automating the Software-Defined Data Center. How do I get started? So it's the third day of VMworld. You've probably heard about the SDDC numerous times each day over the course of the last few days. One of the great benefits is that all of the infrastructure is virtualized and basically delivered as a service and managed by software. So what are some of the key benefits of that approach? Why is there so much interest in the SDDC? Well, there's a couple of key benefits, a few amongst those: abstraction and pooling of resources, and the last one, automation. Does anybody want to venture a guess as to which one will resonate more with senior management? Number one, number two, number three? Hello? Automation is really the one that talks to senior management, right? Why is that? The business benefits are obvious, right? With automation, you do things faster, with better quality, and at much lesser cost. So if your boss or somebody has heard about SDDC and automation, you know what? They're going to get excited about this. And the first thing they'll do once you get back to the office is get me that SDDC, implement that. Right? So you've been working with VMware technology for the last few years. What's the first thing you do? You go to the ever-expanding price list on the product catalog and start browsing down the list. Where is VMware vCloud Software-Defined Data Center Automator? Where is VCSDDC-A? Can't find it on the screen. So because it's the last day, and you guys made the special effort to come here and listen to us where you had many other options, we're going to give you a gift during this session. If you go ahead and purchase the vCloud Suite Enterprise Plus SDDC Platinum Edition, there is a special code that will give you that special Automator product.
That has to be the Platinum Edition, right? The Essentials won't work, or?
No, it has to be the most expensive suite.
The most expensive,
yeah,
okay.
vSphere, Essentials, Foundation, all that stuff.
So remember, the most expensive thing we do, you must buy it, okay?
Exactly. So just type in the license code defy_convention, and after that, boom, that's it. Your data center is automatically automated.
Yep.
And that's it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The exits are over here. Thank you. Don't forget to rate us, right? In terms of efficiency, presentation. I don't think it gets better than this.
That sounds awesome, Thomas, and I love this product. Mm-hmm. We've been using it in VMware for a while now.
Yep.
We just tick the button and everything's automated. It's fantastic. Yep. But I seem to remember we had some issues with power. How did we get around that?
So we had some issues with power because we tried solar power that was too weak. We tried nuclear power that was a bit too strong. So we found that the only power that works really well is people-powered power supply, right? That's really the only thing that gets your data center to the right level of performance.
Okay.
So initially, obviously, we had to talk to our legal department, right? They put on a few roadblocks, but after we explained the benefits, we're like, go ahead. You can use contractors, temporary workers, interns. It works perfectly fine. So just be sure you talk to your legal departments before you deploy it. It may not be obvious, but we were acting, right? This is not real. We're very badly acting, but this is not real.
I was going to go download that. What are you talking
about? But what is very real is the actual problem, right? You hear about the software data center. How do you automate everything for provisioning, operations, and whatnot? But then where do you go from there? What product do you use to accomplish this? So basically, over the next hour or less now, we're going to go over some of the major automation technologies that are available. But then Alan will actually go to the next level and sort of explain to us what are the different technologies available and what are the products that you use for automation for certain use cases. We're obviously going to give you, it's one thing to look at a chart. We're going to give you some quick demos of those various products so you understand what they do. And then we'll give you some tips that basically we've collected over the last few years, talking to customers, talking to our field people, that really help make your automation project successful, right? What are the top things you need to do or not do to make your automation initiative successful? And then finally, we'll end with I guess some thoughts about where we think the future of automation is headed. So by the end of this session, you should be able to understand data center automation and all of its benefits, identify the right automation product for your specific needs, and then finally identify what are the top things to know to make your automation project successful or not. So by the way, my name is Thomas Korfmat. I'm a product manager in the cloud management space at VMware for the cloud automation and orchestration products. And Alan?
My name is Alan Renouf. I work in technical marketing. It's basically my job to go out and talk about automation products, things like Power CLI, and actually how they can make your life easier. But also from your perspective, you help me by giving me the information to take back and make our products a lot better. So if you have that kind of information, we'd love to hear from you in the Q&A. If you think things should be easier, if things don't work the way they should, please do let us know. We're interested in that kind of stuff. And the whole reason why Thomas went through the start, and we did that little bit of an act, was that I'm sure you've seen from our session, the general session, you know, everybody gets up and talks about automation and how important it is, how you need it straight away. And it makes it sound like it is this just tick button that you tick in our interface, and then suddenly your entire data center is automated. You know, if you're in this room, you know it is not that easy just to tick a button and suddenly that's it, I have automation. Okay, so that was the idea behind Thomas and I getting together and talking about how we can make this easier, how we can explain it easier. So during this session, we're actually going to go through a few things, and we've put some definitions up here, some that I'm sure you're already aware of. So things like automation, you know, that's a big term. It's used widely. It's not just used in IT. You know, the automated creation of cars. You know, the car goes along and gets things put on, and you get a car at the end. It's all about automation, really. But how do we define this in IT?
So did you get lazy and just put a link to Google and Wikipedia? You didn't want to define automation?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just want to clarify. Thank you.
So, you know, we talk about things in this session like script-based automation. So using a script to get a job done. We talk about workflows, which is more of the drag and drop, nice way to do things, more robust. We talk about built-in, kind of, you know, selecting a feature, just enabling something, and then allowing that to do your automation for you. We also talk about policy-based as well, which may be new to some of you, the idea of having a bucket or a predefined area where you can drop things and then all the other systems look at that box and react from that. And we've got a number of other related concepts that we may talk about during this session as well. Things like APIs, you know, obviously if we're starting to talk about automation, how do we do that? You're talking about calling other products automatically. Generally that's done through an API or a CLI or another way to access it. We'll also talk about integration and how some of our products use integration to work with not only our own internal products but external products as well. So when Thomas and I first got together to talk about this, we basically booked a meeting room and sat down in there and talked about automation. Thomas comes from the management BU and I come from the infrastructure BU. These are two different teams within VMware, and yet we were still getting the same questions. You know, we'd meet each other in the corridor and talk about customers and what they were doing, and we had a lot of the same questions, right? So we sat down and thought about how we could think about what we were hearing from our customers and categorize these into different areas of automation. Now, these are the categories that we came up with and the areas of automation that we came up with. And you might not agree with all of them. They might not be relevant to you. There may be other areas of automation that you encounter yourselves. You know, these are just the areas that we categorized ourselves. Things like provisioning and operations and maintenance we used as titles here. And then we categorized under those. And then we went one step further, you know, on the whiteboard. We sat down and we said, okay, well, what does VMware do in these areas? What products do we have that you could use to automate this stuff?
And just to emphasize, the reason we did this is because many times we had some of our account managers or other people come back to us and say, ooh, I have a customer that wants to do automation. What product do I want?
Yeah.
Right? And we need to have some sort of a framework to sort of dive to that next level of detail. Explain to us what kind of automation initiative.
Yep.
So if you think about it, this sort of captures all of the different areas where automation can offer some value.
So you can see we sat down, and as I said, we put the products next to the areas, the products that VMware has at the moment, the products that you could use. And I emphasize the word could, because there's never any one way to do automation. How one person is doing it is not the same way that another person is doing it generally. And at the moment, that's absolutely fine. If you have a solution that works for you, then great, use it. You get the job done, you get the automation task done. That's one less thing for you to do. But what we did is we tried to emphasize this a little bit and said, okay, if I did want to do automation and I didn't know where to start, where would I start looking? So we came up with our own recommendations of these areas and the different areas where you might take a look at the products. And the reason you might do this is because these products were specifically written towards that area of automation or include something for that area of automation. Something like VCOps is great, and people don't think, okay, well, that's automation. But if you think about what it does, being able to actually monitor your systems and use its own algorithms to work out what's going on in that virtual machine and trend your virtual machines, your hosts, your infrastructure to give you a better picture of how a virtual machine should look, then that sounds like automation to me in a form. Because I don't have to sit there, I don't have to define how a virtual machine should look or how it's going to react or when I want to get alerts. So you can see we listed a bunch of different features here. And what we're going to do is we'll obviously make sure that the slide decks are available online afterwards. We're also going to blog this stuff and put a bit of text around it to make ourselves clearer. But we're going to go through some of the products, and we're going to talk about these products and let you know what they do and what areas they might fit in. And we're going to start off with Power CLI. So is there anybody that uses Power CLI in the room at the moment? I've got my hand up, I do, definitely. We've got a few users in the room, okay. So as you'll know, this is kind of script-based automation. It's being able to run a command line, run something that does things on multiple objects. So get me a list of virtual machines and create a snapshot. Get me a list of virtual machines, export these to an Excel spreadsheet. And it's great for doing those kind of quick remediation tasks, the kind of stuff you need to do right now and get it done. It's also great for reporting as well. It has some inbuilt functions that allow you to export that information. And the people that tend to use this is the system administrators, the people that have been managing the VMware infrastructure for a long time. They're getting bored of pointing and clicking each time, so they'll write a quick script to get over what they did before.
So Alan just explained what sort of scripting looks like, and particularly Power CLI. There's another type of automation technology called basically built-in automation or policy-based automation. And one example of this is vCloud Automation Center, right? It's all about automating the entire life cycle of IT services or workloads, starting with infrastructure workloads, but application workloads and whatnot, right? You guys saw a big demo of this yesterday during the keynote session. And here, one of the advantages of using built-in or policy-based automation is you don't need to spend a lot of time standing up the system and configuring it for it to run, right? Just like vCenter operations, you install it, and then a lot of it is basically pre-built. You don't have to do a lot of coding. You don't actually, no coding. You don't have to do work with scripts or anything like that. So the target users are obviously cloud administrators and service architects, but it's all also about offering IT as a service. And really, what better way is there of automating lifecycle than having the end user, the consumer, the requester of that workload, click a button, get it, do self-management, whatever operations they want to do on that workload, and then retire it at the end of the day, right? No human intervention. No IT in the middle having to, and for the end users not having to wait forever until their request is handled via email or something like that. So obviously this is a purpose-built product, a purpose-built automation product for self-service and service lifecycle management. Another type of technology is workflow-based automation, right? And a good example of this is vCenter Orchestrator, which is bundled and licensed along with vCenter Server. So here the target is a bit different. We're looking at the automation specialist. We're also the vSphere administrators and integration engineer. So where VCO comes in and provides the more value, and where it's really sort of the sweet spot for your use cases, is what happens when you need to integrate basically vCenter Server or other VMware products with the rest of your management systems, right? Because we all know that provisioning a VM in vCenter, you can do that with a couple of clicks and it's done in seconds. But when you're putting a workload into production, there's so many things beside that just need to happen, right? You need to provision your monitoring systems, you may need to update your CMDB, you may need to get an IP address from your IP address management system. I mean, there's 15 other things that need to happen besides the core action of provisioning a VM. And if you only automate the VM provisioning and not the rest, it's sort of missing the picture, right? From the end user's perspective, they still have to wait much, much longer than they should. So that's really the sweet spot for VCO. But rather than just showing you slides, we thought we'd give you some brief demos so you get a better idea of what those products are really tailored for.
So what we're going to do is we're going to first of all, jump away from the slides. I know everybody gets bored of slides eventually, right? So we're going to give you a few demos. We're going to go through Power CLI and show you like the sweet spots that people use it for, the main areas that people use it for those people that haven't used it in the room, maybe get you a bit interested in why you might use that. And then we're going to go through VCAC and VCO and how they combine together to create quite a cool solution and give you everything that Thomas just spoke about. So starting off with Power CLI, you can see I've got a Power CLI window open, and for those of you that don't know, Power CLI is obviously a command line tool, and it enables you to hook into your virtual infrastructure and run things in mass. And don't forget that we can also use it to auto deploy our hosts, push our hosts off to push a image and a host profile, combine these and use them on a host to build them up and add them to the cluster and virtual center. So one of the first things I'm running here is, you can see I've done a get VM host NTP server and it wasn't there. So what I'm actually doing is I was going to all of my hosts and saying, okay, add this NTP server to all of my hosts. I don't really care how many there are, just go and do this because I know that's what I need to do. There was also another example on the screen of adding an event setting in there as well. But it's not just for hosts, it's also for virtual machines. We all know how useful snapshots can be. So being able to create a snapshot for a number of virtual machines, maybe they're all in a project, that becomes a single line of code. We've instantly taken a snapshot of all of our virtual machines, and the application owners can go and update their application and know they're safe to come back to it. But as well as using it for managing your infrastructure, the reporting capabilities are great. This is the kind of stuff that got me into Power CLI, being able to export that information you see in the virtual infrastructure straight out into a text file, a CSV file, an Excel spreadsheet with graphs, you name it, you can do it. Being able to export that information and send it off to others in your company becomes very useful.
So the next scenario we're going to go through combines vCloud Automation Center and vCenter Orchestrator. So basically, one of the beauty of vCloud Automation Center is that the end user, based on his or her roles, goes to a portal, and again, based on their role, they'll get access to different kinds of services, infrastructure services in this case. So when they request a machine, everything's pre-built, right? The request forms, in terms of what options, the service architect can configure those, but pretty much the request forms, everything here is pre-built. Now, when the request is kicked off, basically the machine will get spun up, right? So basically, vCloud Automation Center will talk to vSphere to launch the action. But in the meantime, it will also trigger a VCO workflow. And that VCO workflow will actually talk to a plugin to the external IP address management system, Infoblox in this particular case. So basically at this point, a VCO gets the information back from Infoblox, the IP address is confirmed, and the DNS server listing also is confirmed. And then when that happens, then basically the IP goes back to the center server and the machine gets provisioned. So here what you can see is the machine being created, and there's different ways to provision or define how that machine gets provisioned in VCAC. In that case, it's provisioning from a template. So we'll just wait a few seconds until that is complete. And then there's other operations like guest customization or further sort of configuration that you can also automate as part of the same process. So after the machine is provisioned, just quick verification, you power it on, log into it, and then you can verify, for instance, that indeed the IP address has been well configured, that there is IP, a static IP, for instance, has been assigned to the machine. So just a quick check. And there you go, right? There's an assigned dedicated static IP. Another test you can run is for instance, check on the status, do a ping to the external internet just to verify this. But the whole point again is this was fully automated, right? You don't need to send an email to your networking team to say, okay, get me an IP address, right? Everything happened automatically. Now at the end of the day, the user, let's say they were running some tests, they no longer need the machine, they need to destroy it. Right? So once they hit destroy, the reverse operation happens. Right? So basically, the VCAC calls out to vCenter server saying destroy my VM, but you don't want to waste that IP address, right? So basically, that kicks off, that decommissioning operation kicks off a VCO workflow, talks to the Infoblox plugin, which goes ahead and releases that IP address back to the pool. Right? So basically, you're sort of, again, you're using your resources wisely, and whenever something gets decommissioned, it gets thrown back into the pool. So this is just with the IP address, but imagine your CMDBs, creating records, updating records, all those things. Well, all those things can happen in parallel, again, without requiring a technician to go into 10 or 15 different management systems and updating records manually. And then eventually the VM gets deleted from the system.
Okay, so we've been through a few demos. We've told you a few tools that you might use to get started with automation. So hopefully you've got a clearer idea of now where automation fits inside of VMware at the moment. But automation isn't just about the products, it's also about the way you use them, the tips you use, the tricks you have. So Thomas and I sat down and we thought about, the top 10 tricks that we normally tell customers, the kind of things we ask them to do, and the kind of things they first look at when they're automating things. So we wanted to share those tips with you. And the first tip being, measure it. Now it sounds obvious, but if you're going to automate something, you want to make sure that you're in a better state than when you actually were doing it manually. And the only way you can do that really is by measuring the task as it stands when you do it manually. How long does it take end to end? How many approvals do you have to get? What systems do you have to interact with? That kind of stuff. Once you've got that information, it then becomes a lot easier to start looking at the areas you want to automate. You can maybe start looking at the areas that take the longest, that take the most approvals, that take the most man days, and start looking at those areas and automating those. Automation isn't just a let's tick the box and do it. It's a gradual process. You'll have to automate step by step. By measuring it, you can start doing that. You can start seeing the areas you're going to impact and have impact straight away.
So another lesson learned and tip we'd like to share is that automation is good, obviously. If not, we wouldn't be standing here. but automation with standardization, that is great. And here's why. If you automate, if you try to do automation, but you have like hundreds of different permutations of different types of blueprints or environments that you offer to your customers, they may go ahead and request so many different variations that even though the provisioning is automated, afterwards the troubleshooting is going to be a nightmare, right? So when you think about automation, you have to consider the whole life cycle from beginning to end, right? So you don't want to get into those template or blueprint sprawl and where the cost of managing that, maintaining it on an ongoing basis becomes prohibitive. So what we found talking to various customers is you do absolutely want to offer freedom of choice, but you have to find that right balance between flexibility but also standardization to ensure that it's not causing an undue burden on IT operations to maintain over time.
The next one we wanted to share with you is it's all about the people. And I'm not saying you have to join the dark side if you start automation. What I'm saying here is you need to talk to the right people and you need to get corporate sponsorship. You need to make sure that when you're doing something, when you're going to automate something, that you have the corporate sponsor or the stakeholder behind you. Because you're often more than not going to be touching areas that you don't really have access to touch. And they're going to be areas that are in different departments, maybe procedural areas that you need to get the go-ahead from a corporate sponsor to do. So make sure you've got that backing. Make sure everybody's aware of what you want to do. Get them on board. Tell them about what you want to do. Tell them about how much time it's going to save them. And actually, get them involved. Siloed mentality is one of the biggest issues we see with automation. People grabbing hold of stuff. Storage admins love to hug their storage, right? They've got pictures of it in their bedrooms at home. Any storage admins in the room? Any with pictures of it? They're not admitting it, but they do. So, these are the kind of guys that you want to talk to. You want to make sure that they're on board. If you're going to be automatically storage provisioning, talk to them. Tell them what you're doing. Tell them how much time it's going to save them. Tell them about the standardizations that they're going to get from this. You're not going to be sending them an email every week asking them for more space because they're going to be able to do that automatically. Get everybody on board. Get them excited about this stuff. Automation is actually a very exciting subject. When you talk to people about it and you talk to them about how you're going to get rid of their crappy little tasks that they do every single day, they suddenly get excited because they can move onto bigger and better things and more interesting projects. The kind of stuff that everybody's got a list of, but you don't actually get around to doing because your day job gets in the way.
And just like knowing virtualization was a way to move ahead, right, for these system administrators, now more and more it's becoming automation. If you have automation skills, again, whether it's scripting, workflow development, or know how to interact with different systems, that's becoming a more and more valued skill in the marketplace. So the second thing is when you look at your automation projects, you got to find the right selection of people, right? Typically, it's very rare to find a single individual that knows the domain very well, knows the automation technologies very well as can also go ahead and sort of sell the project, sell the benefits internally. So we think it's essential to put in the right mix of people where you've got those domain experts, those people that will tell you sort of what's the logic that needs to happen in your automation routine. But you do also want to get a few people with some scripting and or development experience. If you do end-to-end automation of your data center, you are going to run into some arcane systems or legacy systems where the APIs are not well documented or there's no easy access and whatnot. So having those developer skills on your team becomes very handy. And likewise, in terms of business process and project management, you do want somebody that's constantly moving the project ahead, showing results at every phase to senior management, to make sure that there's ongoing commitment so you view the benefit and ongoing buy-in from all the different departments and again make the whole project successful. Because it is a project, it is a long-term project, but the benefits are tremendous.
And we did have a whole SDDC version of the YMCA that we do here, but we
We're just too tired. It's day 3.
Yeah, it's the last day. We won't take you through that.
And we'll spare you.
The next tip is all about your processes, and often people have processes that have grown organically. So, something that was done at the very start when you had the first piece of kit is not necessarily relevant now, and also not necessarily relevant to automation. If you start thinking about automation, this is a great time when you can look at your processes, look at how they've grown, and actually adjust them for automation. So make sure that you cut down the amount of approvals that you need. Give people the rights or the ability to be able to do what's in their day job, and give them access to the systems they need. This is, we have an advanced process on the screen here. It's maybe a little bit over the top, but it's certainly relevant. Make sure you look at your processes and cut them down. And this is again where the corporate sponsor comes in, because again, you're going to be touching places that you don't necessarily have access to.
And I think one way to think about it also is, again, traditionally, to sort of prevent overconsumption of resources, companies set up so many different approval steps. But there's new ways to think about it. Instead of having all those approval layers, use entitlement policies, use reservation policies. And what we mean by that is provide different types of services and reserve certain capacity and offer that to different business units. And then let them consume as much as they want within those constraints. They'll manage it themselves, right? And they won't have to go back to IT or I don't know how many different layers. You'll still have the same benefits of putting sort of a box or limits around how much they can consume, but at the same time, you won't have the burden and all the wait times associated with so many different levels of approvals. So the next tip is automate incrementally. You obviously, to use the famous analogy, don't want to boil the ocean. Automation is a journey, right? It doesn't happen overnight, but it's key to identify in the various categories, whether it's provisioning, operations, or proactive maintenance. Find the areas that have the most pain. Identify within that subcategory which piece of provisioning causes the most pain in terms of the amount of resources it requires or how long it takes, and then sort of tackle that first piece and go ahead and automate it, and then document it, and then move on to the next pain point that's next down the list. And at some point, you will hit a stage where the cost of doing the automation probably exceeds the value, right? There may be operations or actions that you do twice a year, and you know what? It may take a person close to a day to do that, but the cost of automating it may be much more than that and not worth it. Right? So it's always important to keep that cost versus value of automation sort of a equation in mind.
So the next one we want to talk about is testing. I mean, this is obvious, everybody's used to doing this kind of stuff, but it really is emphasized in an automated environment. You need to test your workflows, you need to make sure they work. Automation is great, but when you do it wrong, you're automating a bunch of crap. Hence the picture on the screen.
You worried me for a second. I thought you were a Justin Bieber fan, but...
No, I'm not a Justin Bieber. So what we're trying to say here is, make sure that you get this stuff working. If you've got a script, a workflow, a procedure that actually goes through and produces the wrong result, it's going to do that very well. It's going to produce that wrong result time and time and time again. Make sure you test it, make sure it works, and you won't end up with a mass pile of crap.
So another tip, and everybody hates this, right? Who likes documentation? Who likes documenting their work? Okay, everybody's normal. That's good. Everybody hates it, but it's a necessary evil, right? You don't want to fall hostage to undocumented automation. We've heard so many horror stories, right, where people say, oh yeah, we do automation. There's this one guy here, he's written the script, which is absolutely wonderful. Very recently, we spoke to a Fortune 50 global company that had this huge automation initiative. They had 2 guys that were key to that project. They left the company. they told us, you know what, we've lost about 6 months to a year's worth of automation because we needed to evolve it to the next stage, and we don't know how to change it. It's too complicated. We cannot decipher what those guys wrote. Those guys were brilliant, but they did not document their work. So make sure you document at every step of your automation initiative. Some of the great things about some of the newer tools is, so first of all, for instance, if you're using Power CLI scripting, the constructs are fairly easy to understand, right? Sometimes it helps to add a bit of documentation, but at least it's somewhat human readable.
Exactly, because of the standardization that's in PowerShell, being able to pick up a script, you can almost read it like it's English. So that is a form of documentation in itself.
Yeah, and if you're designing workflows, for instance, with vCentral Orchestrator, so first of all, the fact that those workflows are graphical, they model the process you're automating, right? And then you can add annotations, like post-it notes in your workflow diagram and whatnot. So very quickly, that provides sort of a quick way to understand what's going on. What's more is, for instance, in VCO, there's this built-in documentation generation button. You press that, it spits out your entire workflow with the input parameters, the version history, who's done what, who's changed what. If you've added a bit of scripting in one of the steps in your workflow, it will document the scripting. So it's great not just for sort of documenting and maintaining the knowledge about what's going on, but for auditing purposes as well. It's a fantastic time saver. And finally, if you're talking about other products like vCloud Automation Center, there's predefined blueprints. And what are blueprints? There's forms with options, right? That's easy to understand. You don't have to worry about what kind of code goes underneath. You print out a screenshot of your blueprint, and there you go. You know what it's provisioning, using what technology, with what options, and what's not. But if you change administrators, you're not going to take a lot of time to just transfer the knowledge.
And tip number 9 here is actually talking about end-to-end automation. Because what good is a front-end service portal when it just ends up with an email in somebody's inbox asking them to create the virtual machine? Or equally, what good is a telephone system that rings you up and asks you to create the virtual machine, and then you kick off a script or a workflow or a policy that actually goes and creates that virtual machine? When you're thinking about automation, start thinking about it end-to-end, so including the self-service with the back-end automation, being able to follow that process all of the way through, including the approvals if they're needed. You know, allow the emails to still go through, but make sure that when they're accepted, it goes straight back into the policy system, and that's the bit that does the work for you. The amount of times we've seen people slowed down because the process includes an email for somebody, you know, maybe several emails, and then waiting for them to get back from holiday, or waiting for them to approve something because they have busy time schedules, it becomes a hindrance.
Yeah, and remember, here what matters is the end-to-end time from an end user's perspective, right? If you've automated the back end and say, oh, I can provision and even sort of integrate with all the systems, and it takes 5 minutes. If the end user is waiting 4 hours to get a response on the approval, that's their SLA, right? That's their experience that's ruined, and that's why they'll go directly bypass IT and go to a public cloud vendor. So we've spoken a lot about the different technologies, right? Workflows, policy-based, scripting, and hopefully you get a good sense by now sort of what is the sweet spot for each one of them. But there's also a great rule of thumb to look at when you consider what technologies are you using within your organization. And basically one of our colleagues, Andy Trapp, wrote this wonderful article that we strongly encourage you to go and read, where he talks about sort of this good practice of when should you use policy versus policy-based automation versus workflows versus scripting. And really, hopefully, you're moving towards a place where the vast majority of your automation is policy-based. And why policy-based? Because it's built into the product. You just choose a few options, right? It's just like DRS. It's just like entitlements or approval policies. The time to production with those types of systems is tremendously fast. Workflows, you should use workflows as well, but where the sweet spot is for workflows is basically to help tie all of the different systems together in your end-to-end automation scenario. So integration is definitely the sweet spot for this. And then finally, scripting. We told you about the advantages and benefits of different technologies. There is absolutely a space, and we think there always will be, not just because Mr. Power CLI man is standing next to me, but there will always be a need for scripting, right? There's nothing that's faster in terms of if you need to prototype something quickly or do a quick report or whatnot, do that right now. We've even seen some scenarios where some customers have a automation specialist team using either policy-based management or workflow-based, sort of build an automation framework, and then left some pieces of scripting down to these particular administrators of their storage system or networking system and whatnot. So the central automation team built the core logic, but then involved those specialists with their system to sort of write the last mile and then hook the two together to really achieve end-to-end automation. So with that said, these are the top 10 tips. We had some discussions also with quite a number of our colleagues about the future of automation. We also consulted the Oracle, not the company, but the actual Oracle. And she told us that the future was pretty bright. Basically what she said is that the future of automation is policy-based. I'm sure nobody saw that coming, right? But basically, it all starts with entitlement policies, right? Ensuring that you define the right services and entitle them to the right groups. And then setting up the next series of business policies, quotas, budgets, reservations, right? So that you pre-allocate various units of resources to different groups and let them sort of manage it themselves, right? As long as there's reservations and limits, they won't be able to provision a new machine unless they decommission one they haven't been using for a while, right? That will, over time, you'll find they sort of self-regulate themselves. And then obviously, based on the types of service offerings and the types of availability options or policies that are defined, expose those as options in your catalog items or service offerings, and then that will go ahead and interact with the infrastructure layer and basically ensure that the workloads are provisioned in the right areas based on data protection policies, availability policies, or site availability if you're talking about highly important workloads where you need to have disaster recovery scenarios in mind. So again, I don't think we can overemphasize the fact that really policy-based management is where you'll get the most value, not just in how quickly you'll be able to deploy the solutions, but over time, it will cost you much less to maintain and keep working and expanding.
So we wanted to move on and tell you about other sessions that you could have attended if this wasn't the last day. But in all seriousness, these are great ones that you can actually go back and look at the videos for on VMworld.com. You know, you're all here, so you've all got to log into VMworld.com. You can go there, you can download the videos, you can download the decks and watch all these kind of stuff again. Are you aware of any of these still happening, Thomas, or are they all pretty much finished by now?
I think they're all done, except for the Hansel Labs, of course, but...
Power CLI, there was a bunch of sessions here. They were all awesome because I was in them. I was joking. You could have agreed with me then, but you missed your chance. So make sure you check on the hands-on labs. That was great. And also, I do have a group discussion left today. If you don't have a flight out of here, you're looking for something to do, maybe you want a coffee, you want to just join us and have a little chat about Power CLI, I'd love to see you there. And that's in half an hour in a room that I cannot remember, but I need to look up because I need to be there. And finally, thank you very much for attending this session. I hope it was useful. I hope you were able to take away some information about how to get started with automation and what's available from automation. Obviously, make sure you fill out your surveys. We like the number 5. It's our personal favorite number.
Yeah, I think so.
Yep, 5's a great number. So if you're wondering about what to put in there, 5 is the number. So any questions? Anything we can help with? Anything that doesn't work? Anything you want to see out of the products that, to do with automation? Now is your time. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.